Well, good evening and welcome along to our Meet the Candidate event, and we're very glad to have you here. For those of you here in the room and those watching us online, we're very glad to have you with us as well. The aim of this event is to help people make informed choices as they vote. It's a great thing to be in a democracy where the members of the public can have an influence on the government and what happens there. I've lived in a country for a number of years where that wasn't the way elections were done, and people were in danger of losing their jobs or other things if they didn't vote the right way. And there'd be many other people in our community who have also experienced that. So it's a wonderful thing to have a democracy, and we want to encourage people to vote carefully and wisely in what they do. And we're running this event in association with Freedom for Faith, which is running a range of events right across Sydney and raising some of the issues for people of faith as we come to an election and think about some of the policies of the government as well, and seek to ask the questions that people of faith are wanting to know about, and encourage those standing for election to think about these issues as well. We want to do this event in a non-partisan way. We're not trying to push any particular party or policy, but encourage people to make an informed choice. And certainly in the church here, we never tell people how to vote, but do pray regularly for each level of our government, as the Bible encourages us to pray for those who are in those positions of authority. So my name's David Clarke. I'm the Senior Minister here at Hoxton Park Anglican Church, and I have Nathan Haggerty with me here. We did invite Therese Fidelli in December to come and join us for tonight, and have extended that invitation a number of other times, but she's not able to be with us tonight. And so as we commence, Nathan, maybe you could tell us a bit about yourself and your background and why it is that you're standing for election.
Sure, thanks, David. Yep, we good? Yep, okay, thanks, David. Can I start by thanking you for pulling this all together? Can I thank Hoxton Park Anglican Church for hosting us, and of course Freedom for Faith for holding these events right throughout New South Wales. As you said in your introduction, these kinds of things are really, really important for the sake of democracy, especially so in these parts of Sydney where unfortunately the local paper has long gone. For a lot of people, we don't get much local news anymore. We don't learn about our local candidates, and I see this, I relish this as an opportunity to sit in front of some people that will make a very important decision in 22 days and essentially decide what direction this state takes. And if I'm lucky enough to be elected as the member for Leppington, as part of that, I'm very regularly going to be asked difficult questions. I don't get to pick and choose who comes through the Electorate office. I don't get to pick and choose the questions that the media or the opposition will be asking me in the Parliament. So it's important that I front up here and I listen to what the community has to say, and likewise I think it's important that they find out why I'm running. So I guess the reason why I'm running and the reason why I got involved in politics was I took probably an unorthodox path into politics. I avoided student politics like the plague. I didn't get involved in the Labor Party until I was in my early to mid-30s, and one of the reasons was had a young family. My wife Christy here is in the audience, and my two beautiful children, Evan and Nia. I've lived in the area my whole life, and more often than not we found ourselves going outside of the area, to take the kids to the park or for a bike ride, or to go to a nice facility or a restaurant, and I didn't see any reason why we couldn't have these nice things in Liverpool or in Leppington. I'm very proud of some of the things I've achieved on council. We've done a fair bit, and there's still a fair bit to go. But as the area has grown, we still see the new suburbs and new communities, but with the same old problems. And Leppington's a case in point. We've got tens of thousands of homes that have gone into places like Austral, Leppington, Denham Court, but in just those three suburbs alone, you've got not a single public high school, and I think that's a scandal that the government have planned for these communities. They know that more often than not it's young families that buy a first home in these type of places, and therefore you're going to need public primary schools, you're going to need public high schools, and they've had 12 years to deliver that and they haven't done it. Same question on health. You've got Liverpool and Campbelltown Hospital, and we can't commend what the health professionals there have done enough. Especially over the last couple of years, they've done a fantastic job. But quite simply, the health system in this part of the world is in crisis. We had the Bureau of Health Information Statistics come out during the week. Southwest Sydney has the largest elective waiting list in the state. People leaving the emergency department has gone up 42% year on year. And so just to explain that one, there's been a 42% increase in people going to an emergency department in hospitals in this region and leaving before they've been treated. And I even had a mate of mine ring me last week. His kid was playing cricket and had a bit of an injury with the cricket ball. Went to Liverpool Hospital, sat around for 5 or 6 hours. Went home, came back the next day, sat around for 3 or 4 hours, said, go over to Westmead, sat around for 2 or 3 hours at Westmead and finally got his cast put in. Now, we're a first world country, we used to have one of the best health systems in the world. There's no reason why we shouldn't have one of the best health systems in the world. And so I can sit here and complain all night, or I can tell you, I've got solutions and I've got a plan, and I do. We're going to build a public high school in Leppington to cater for those new communities I spoke about. We're going to invest in Fairfield Hospital, the hospital where my 2 kids were born, which really hasn't had a significant investment since it was built nearly 30 years, or probably about 30 years ago. We're also going to start the plan to build a new hospital out near the Aerotropolis. So by 2040, they reckon that'll be a city on par with Adelaide in terms of population. We just can't keep putting more and more pressure on Campbelltown and Liverpool hospitals. And then you get on to the essential services. So in terms of things like firefighters, the population of New South Wales has increased by 1 million people over the last 10 years. And the amount of firefighters has pretty much remained stagnant. It's gone back about a dozen or so, but let's just call it stagnant. In terms of police, we know out here that we've seen some pretty high-profile incidents, but police, instead of expanding police numbers, we've seen the local area commands go from 2 to 1 in this region. So we have to expand essential services, and we're going to put 50 new police officers in southwest Sydney. And of course, the other big one is roads and infrastructure. The biggest bugbear that everyone brings up with me is the road just over here, 15th Avenue. It's the main arterial road in and out of Austral, and it is a single lane council road with no curb or gutter. Now, I'm very, very excited to announce yesterday that we will upgrade 15th Avenue, $50 million for 15th Avenue. So I can sit here and complain, or I can offer solutions, and I'm offering solutions. And essentially what it boils down to for me is Mum and Dad left school when they were 15 and 14. I grew up in public housing. I went to public schools, and I was the first person in my family to go to university and graduate. And I think that a lot of that opportunity comes from good governments and good Labor governments. And we're starting to lose that opportunity, and I see a lot of opportunity in this community with young kids and even with us adults, especially with the airport coming in 2026. There are going to be some really good, high quality, well-paying jobs, and I want to make sure that all of us share in that opportunity.
Great, thank you for that. We're aiming for tonight to be a little bit interactive, and so there is a Slido that we'll be doing as the night goes on, so that you can put your questions up on the screen, and other people will be able to vote on those questions. So that's the code. If you go either to the website or to the app of Slido and put in those numbers, that will bring up where you can put your questions there to ask, and we'll go through those as we go along. There are a number of ways people know you, and particularly through council, and many people have spoken to me very favourably about the way that you've been responsive to their concerns. And so I think that's been a wonderful thing for you. Certainly I've experienced it myself, where needed things done and that you've actually got something done. But other people have said, I emailed Nathan and he responded at 6 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, and no one else responded. And so that's where those who are serving the public are doing a great job. We want to acknowledge that and thank you for that service you've given in council.
Thank you.
Local religious leaders come into Liverpool Council to lead the prayers, and so I've been into council many times over the last decade, and it's been a bit of rough and tumble at times there. I remember times when the police have been called to calm things down and other things like that. But you've also got a reputation of behaving well and, being constructive in a lot of those things. So we just want to give credit.
I don't know if my political opponents would agree with that, but I'll take it.
Anyway, just in terms of what is coming up with this election, it is a state election, and sometimes there's some confusion for people in terms of the issues, who they go to. And one of the challenges for people in public office is often you only see people when they've got a problem, and that's your interaction. But understanding what are the issues that are for the state election are important. This is from the Parliamentary Education Office. It has on their website a number of different distinctions about the federal government, the state governments, and the local councils and what their responsibilities are. There's a whole lot of information on the Parliament website too, that gives information about how Parliament works with the upper and lower house. Got another slide there. And so you're running for what's called the lower house. So you're representing an area. Leppington's a new electorate that hasn't existed before, so it's not as if you're replacing another person, it's the first time. And this is drawn from a number of surrounding electorates as the population grows and there's need for appropriate representation. And then there's also there information on what the members should do on the parliamentary website. So I encourage you to read those resources if you're confused about what a member of parliament should be doing and what their resources are that they can or can't work with. And so that information is there if you want to understand those things, or I'm sure Nathan would be happy to ask those things as well.
Yeah, look, and some of that information you gave there from the Parliamentary Education Office, get in touch with your federal member, because they can obtain free resources and nice little glossy books, and they actually are really, really good resources, no matter how old you are, a copy of the Constitution or some booklets. So the more we know and the more we understand about our system of government, the better citizens we are, and the better we will demand of our representatives, and the better country we become. Very good.
Well, the first three questions we're going to look at tonight come from Freedom for Faith and are going to be introduced with a short video. So the first one is about religious institutions employing people in line with their faith. So we'll roll the video. Thanks, Nick.
Religious people and organisations have long played a crucial role in our communities. A large proportion of our education, health and social services are provided by faith-based organisations, and nearly all of Australia's largest charities have Christian roots. People of faith continue to contribute to our society's welfare because of their religious values, and governments recognise their contributions by partnering with them to deliver important services. This is now under threat from new laws that undermine the very heart and soul of faith-based organisations. As a result of recent amendments to anti-discrimination law in various states, faith-based organisations such as churches, synagogues, mosques, religious schools, charities and aged care can no longer insist that their staff adhere to or model their religious beliefs and values. At the federal level, the recent Australian Law Reform Commission consultation paper, issued at the request of the Labor government, escalates this threat. This strikes at the heart of a religious organisation's ability to preserve their ethos and effectively carry out their religious mission in service to their communities, and is a huge blow to both religious freedom and freedom of association. This is happening despite a growing awareness of people being seriously mistreated because of their religion, and the wide consensus that religious freedom is vital and needs to be protected. While it is right and proper to protect individuals from unjust discrimination, these new laws fail to get the balance right between the freedom of people of faith to operate faith-based institutions and the freedom of individuals who do not support that faith. And it is not hard to get the balance right. The Commonwealth Religious Discrimination Bill had bipartisan support on this issue, and the New South Wales Religious Freedoms and Equality Bill had the support of a bipartisan Joint Select Committee. Each of these had sensible mechanisms that provided robust protection against religious discrimination for individuals, while at the same time recognising that it was not discriminatory for religious bodies to operate in accordance with their religious beliefs. We allow other groups formed around a set of values, such as unions and political parties, to employ people who agree with their beliefs and ethos, but are now at risk of denying the same right to faith-based organisations. This state election, ask your candidates, will you support legislation that both protects religious individuals from discrimination while also protecting the freedom of religious bodies to operate in accordance with their values and to preference staff who align with them?
Well, that's our question. And this past week, both Dominic Perrottet and Chris Minns have had meetings with leaders of faith groups and been asked the same questions. So will you support legislation that both protects religious individuals from discrimination while also protecting the freedom of religious bodies to operate in accordance with their values and to preference staff who align with them?
Yeah, so I think it was mentioned in the video there, but essentially this is a federal issue.
Yep.
And I think as recent as last week, the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese did reaffirm the Labor government's commitment to allow religious organisations to preference staff based on their faith. Now, in relation to the Anti-Discrimination Act at a state level, when it was brought in, it was a pretty revolutionary piece of legislation. It was groundbreaking, but it is getting a bit old, a bit creaky, and so a Labor government has committed to referring the Anti-Discrimination Act to the Law Reform Commission for a wholesale review, from top to bottom. And I think we'll probably get some recommendations on that one. Now, what I will say is that Labor has also committed in the first 100 days to outlawing discrimination to people based on their faith, and amending the Anti-Discrimination Act that way. So we've made a commitment, and that's a firm commitment within the first 100 days. So, yep.
Sure. Federal and state plays different roles in that, and have both had attempts at getting policies through and not got there yet. But we appreciate the commitment from both sides of politics to keep working on those things. Our second question is about poker machine reform, which has been in the news a bit, and certainly this part of Sydney is an area where there are many people, certainly I've dealt with, who have suffered through some of those things. So we'll roll the question.
Hi, I'm Reverend Stu Cameron from Wesley Mission. Did you know that Australians lose $25 billion each year through gambling, and half of the total losses are through poker machines? Australia is home to nearly 80% of the world's pub and club poker machines. The problem is worst in New South Wales. New South Wales could be dubbed the pokey state. New South Wales is home to almost half of the poker machines in Australia, just over 86,000 in pubs and clubs and 1,500 at the Star. In the last 30 years, people across New South Wales have lost $135 billion through poker machines. The most recent data available shows that between July and September 2022, people across New South Wales lost more than $2 billion to poker machines in pubs and clubs. Gambling doesn't just affect an individual person alone. For every person impacted, 5 to 10 others are also harmed. Harm to relationships, health and psychological well-being are some of the most common impacts. The highest at-risk groups of people that we connect with at Wesley Mission are those who have experienced trauma, where gambling becomes an outlet for overwhelming emotions, compounding the harm caused. But change is coming. Between royal commissions and inquiries into casinos, the New South Wales Crime Commission's recent investigation into money laundering in pubs and clubs, and federally, inquiries into online gambling and its impacts on people experiencing gambling harm, we're at a tipping point in Australia. Poker machine reform and a cashless gambling card are now key election issues in the lead up to the New South Wales state election on March 25. And you can join us in addressing gambling harm as we put pokies in their place.
So the question for you, Nathan, is what is your party's response to the Crime Commission's recommendation? But more importantly, what will your party do to address the epidemic of gambling harm in New South Wales?
Yeah, I think you spoke about it before they rolled the video, but problem gambling is certainly a massive problem in this part of the world, and I know I've spoken to you about this previously, and I think for every one of us living in this part of the world, we know a family member or a friend that's succumbed to problem gambling and, you know, got paid in the afternoon, and then, you know, within a few hours is down at the pub and have put their entire pay packet through. So it's a massive problem out here, and we certainly need to do something about it. Now, it has been a very topical issue during this election campaign, and what triggered that, of course, was the Crime Commission report. And first and foremost, I will say that, you know, I have zero tolerance for money laundering, especially at pubs and clubs, which are intended to be venues where you know, you go there with your family and your kids for a nice meal and a bit of entertainment. So New South Wales Labor have committed to a cashless gambling trial, and we've also committed to a whole suite of reforms that don't just deal with the problem of money laundering, but problem gambling in general. So when we announced our reforms, I think it was in January, we immediately stopped taking donations from gambling organisations, and if elected, we will ban that across the board. So no politicians will be able to take donations from gambling organisations. We are also going to reduce the amount of gambling, the amount of poker machines. We're going to reduce the cash limit. So my understanding is at present you can put up to $5,000 in cash. We'll drop that to 500, so that'll make a big dent in that specific issue about money laundering. And the other thing we'll do as well is get rid of those signs you see out the front of venues, you know, VIP lounge and those kinds of things, which I think you know, which act as a honeypot. And so we'll get rid of those, and it's a suite of reforms. It's measured, and I think they'll be very, very effective in reducing problem gambling in our community.
Which should be good for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
So the third question is about so-called conversion therapy legislation. It's probably the issue that's raised the most questions for people in the community in talking to me. We'll play the video.
Independent MP Alex Greenwich has signalled his intention to bring so-called conversion therapy laws to the New South Wales Parliament. These laws purport to ban barbaric practices such as electric shock treatment that seek to change a person's sexual orientation. There is, however, no evidence that such practices are occurring. In fact, conversion therapy laws in other states go much further than simply banning barbaric practices. Under such legislation, it is illegal to aid or counsel someone in accordance with traditional religious stances regarding sexuality and gender identity, even with the person's clear consent. In Victoria, for example, the legislation prohibits anyone, not just psychologists or religious leaders in schools, churches, synagogues and mosques, from supporting or giving encouragement to someone to live in accordance with traditional sexual morality. Astonishingly, during the parliamentary debate on the laws, the Victorian Attorney-General confirmed that it would be illegal for anyone to support a father who decided that he is no longer heterosexual, but who wishes to remain committed to his pre-existing marriage in order to raise his children. This is because such support, even from his wife, would be considered as suppressing his homosexual desires. Furthermore, the laws prohibit anyone, including the parents of young children, from encouraging their child who is questioning their gender identity to maintain the unity between biological sex and gender. Even some acts of prayer reflecting traditional religious teaching on sexuality or gender identity are criminalised. In addition to the prospect of criminal prosecution, religious schools and institutions stand to lose their accreditations or charity status if they breach the laws. This represents an unprecedented state violation of both freedom of religion and an individual's personal choice. This election, ask your candidates, will you oppose legislating any conversion therapy bill that prevents people from practicing their religion or encouraging others to do likewise?
So given some of the discussion that's gone on so far, the question we're going to ask you is tailored a little bit from that. But if there is a bill introduced banning conversion therapy practices, will you commit to protecting consensual pastoral care such as prayer and other spiritual support for a person who wishes to live in accordance with their faith?
I'll start off by saying, as someone who grew up in Western Sydney, it's a diverse, multicultural community, and one thing that's very, I don't know if it's unique, but it's a very much a distinct feature of this community is the role that your church or your place of worship plays in everyday life. And I know that for people who aren't of faith or aren't of religion, they may see their church as somewhere they go occasionally for a wedding or a funeral. But for many in our community, regardless of their religion or their background, the place of worship, the church, is a fundamental part of their everyday life. So, it's not just on Fridays for prayers or Sundays for prayers. It's youth group, which I know is taking place just over there at the moment. It could be seniors group, language school, and I think you'd have this issue as well, where your pastor isn't someone you just go speak to for pastoral advice. There's everyday advice about, I'm thinking about changing my job, or I'm having some problems with the family at home. So I think we need to understand that first and foremost, that especially in this community, the role that faith and places of worship play. So, but both Labor and Liberal have committed to introducing a bill to ban conversion therapy. What I want to make abundantly clear is that any bill that's introduced in New South Wales by Labor will be a New South Wales bill. It won't be a Victorian bill, it won't be a Greenwich bill, it'll be a New South Wales bill, and we will consult with survivors, with support groups, with health professionals, and with members of the faith community. And I've already, you and I have already sat down, I think back in October, and we had a really, really good chat about it. And you raised some of your concerns about some of the examples that were raised there. I took those to the leader's office. I had a chat with Chris about it, and I'm pleased to see that we've given that undertaking, that the example that's given there certainly won't be something that we'd be looking at. And that's whether it's conversion therapy or whether it's anything else to do with people of faith, I'll certainly have an open door as the member for Leppington, and that's not an election promise. That's just a fact, because we're already doing that. We've already had a chat about some of these issues, and I've already taken it towards up to the leadership. But we will formalise that arrangement. New South Wales Labor will establish a faith council. The faith council will have representatives from all the major religions, and the point of that will be to ensure that the faith council is speaking to a Labor government, the Labor government speaking to the faith council, and we are ensuring that things like any proposed legislation is done in consultation with a wide range of groups, including members of faith. Now, an undertaking that I want to give tonight is that while the Faith Council may represent various religions, if Labor's elected, one of the things that I will be doing is fighting to ensure that it doesn't just have a range of religious representation, but there's some geographic representation there. I think it's essential that we have representatives on that faith council from southwest Sydney.
Yep.
And I've got Charisma Caliander here, who's the candidate for Liverpool, and we've had a chat about that, and we agree on that one. That's something we'll both be fighting for. But regardless of whether it's this formal faith council or not, you know that you'll have an open door, and so will any member of any faith in Leppington when it comes to these kind of issues.
Sure, thank you. There are a couple of other questions I've communicated to Nathan earlier that I was going to ask that reflect some of the recurring themes of people who had conversations with me, couldn't all be here or embarrassed to ask in these sort of forums. So the first question, the Slido details are there, so you can add your questions for after I've done mine, and feel free to do those. There's an awareness in the community about corruption in various levels of government and a perception that it's increasing. And so the question is, what has been your approach to dealing with corruption in the past, and what do you intend to do going forward if elected?
Yep. Zero tolerance. Zero tolerance for corruption. And I did give that little preamble at the beginning where I spoke about one of the reasons I did run for council was to provide better facilities for my family and others. But one of the other reasons I ran was because if you've lived in this area for a while, you know that Liverpool Council unfortunately doesn't have the greatest reputation. We've had mayors raided by ICAC, we've had council chambers burned down, we've had the Oasis scandal, we've had councils sacked. And part of me running and wanting to be an elected official was because I wanted to clean the joint up. I got elected in 2016 on a platform of appointing an independent ombudsman. We have done that. The independent ombudsman is still in place. And I would ask people watching at home and in the crowd tonight to keep a really close eye on that and make sure that under the current council we don't get rid of the independent ombudsman. They do a very, very important job, and they provide a channel for you to raise issues. Now, at the state level, obviously ICAC is the main agency there. It also does look after councils, but one of the issues I think we've seen with ICAC, especially with the current government, is a reduction in funding and resources. So we can't have a situation where ICAC's funding and resources and what it chooses to investigate and not investigate is at the whim of a treasurer's budget or a premier's budget choices. So Labor has committed to setting up a process whereby funding for ICAC is at arm's length, it's independent, and it's given enough funding and resources to undertake the kinds of investigations that it needs to undertake. Now, for all we know, there could be a situation where, certain investigations were just as red hot as others, but ICAC's decided to not investigate them any further because they don't have the resources. Now, that should not be the case, and they've got to have enough funding and resources to without fear or favour, stamp out corruption.
Sure. Public transport. The train line to Edmondson Park and Leppington, and with associated car parking, has been a wonderful provision for the residents of this electorate. There has been much talk from all parties about the Western Sydney Airport, about metro lines and things like that. So the question, what will you and your party do to link the Leppington train station with the Aerotropolis and the Western Sydney Airport if elected?
Yep, so I agree. The train line along Leppington there is a great piece of public transport, and some of us in this room had to fight pretty hard to get a car park there. So good win for the people of this area. In regards to that, we have committed to getting on with the job of linking Leppington to the airport, so we'll undertake a business case there. What we'll also do is link the MacArthur through as well. The other thing that we'll do is ensure that there is good quality public transport linking the people of this community, Leppington and Liverpool, to the airport on day one. So it's all a bit of a blur, but I'm pretty sure it was yesterday we announced $305 million to ensure rapid buses from Penrith, Campbelltown and Liverpool to the airport. And as part of that commitment, I was very proud to announce that we'll be spending $50 million to upgrade 15th Avenue. So for those that don't know, 15th Avenue, if you keep going in a straight line, you bump right into the airport. So that provides a fantastic opportunity to link the Liverpool CBD with the airport, but you've also got communities along that stretch that will have access to all those jobs and opportunities there. Now, that is in stark contrast to the current government. They've promised $50 billion in public transport, and they haven't told us how they're going to pay for it. And we know how they're going to pay for it, because it's the same way they paid for everything else, and that's by privatising our assets. The Premier has been a bit clever with his language, but the next thing on the chopping block is Sydney Water. We've seen it with tolls. Once the tolls got privatised, your tolls went up. Once the energy assets got privatised, your energy prices went up. And you know what's going to happen if this government gets re-elected. They're going to privatise Sydney Water, and the price of your water is going to go up.
So the next question sort of follows on from that about delivering and funding election promises. So there have been some wonderful commitments made about roads and infrastructure upgrades for areas like Austral that desperately need attention with their exploding population. So the question is, given the strong commitment to not selling off government assets, what will be done to fund the promises made in the run-up to the election, and what confidence can we have that these will actually be delivered?
Yep, so every single thing that I've announced and New South Wales Labor announced is costed, it's deliverable, and we'll get it done. So we've been very strict and very frugal with what we've done. We've made sure that any commitment that we've called on, there is funding there to do it. It's reasonable, and it's going to be delivered. Now, I'm going to repeat myself, but again, that stands in stark contrast to our opponents. Again, $50 billion in public transport, and they haven't told us how they're going to pay for it. And they're going, we know what they're going to do. They're going to privatise Sydney Water. They're going to privatise anything that's left that hasn't been nailed down, and we're all going to pay for it.
Different question, a local one that hasn't had much airplay. The age of criminal responsibility. The New South Wales Parliament, with the encouragement of Green Senator David Shoebridge, there's been an investigation into lowering the age of criminal responsibility in New South Wales. In our local area here, there are many residents having their cars and homes broken into at night, and people being threatened with weapons by kids and young teenagers. What's your perspective on changing the law so that these young people are no longer criminally responsible for what they do? And what are your suggestions for how we address these problems here in our local Leppington community?
Yeah, I touched on this before, and you mentioned it just then, that someone who's very involved in the community and keeps a keen eye on the Facebook groups, there has been a disturbing increase in car break-ins and break-ins, and a couple of weeks ago we had a shooting at a house just down the road here at Carnes Hill. A few months before that, we had a frightening daytime armed robbery at a jewellery store at the shopping centre across the road, and it is of concern. New South Wales Labor has committed to 50 additional police officers in South West Sydney. I think they said that before, but it does bear repeating because it deals with this issue. 50 additional police officers for this area means that response times will come down. And that when things like this happen, we can get to them. Now, on the specific question of consent, my understanding is that the Attorney Generals from each of the jurisdictions in Australia meet with the Federal Attorney General, and that's something they're working through at the moment. And New South Wales Labor has committed to taking a look at the criminal age of consent.
Sure, thank you. Well, let's turn to some of the questions that people have asked so far. So, just check why this is not linking. So, first question, what will Labor do to help us reduce the cost of living? In particular, tolls are expensive. This person says they work in Hunters Hill and it's expensive. How will you fix this?
Yeah, tolls are one of the major factors that are hitting people's pockets in this area. Effectively, tolls act as a tax on people in Western Sydney. You can't sort of go anywhere really around Sydney without, take a few left turns, and the next thing you hear is the dink of the E-tag, unfortunately. And we've got the M7, we've got the M5, we've got the M8 now, and all of those are going up year on year. The government has entered into an agreement where those tolls will go up 4% year on year or more if inflation's more. So at the very least, those tolls are going to go up, and they're going to keep going up under the current government. Labor has announced a great policy, and we announced it actually just down the road with a beautiful young family at Carnes Hill, where we will cap tolls at $60 a week. So in the same way where your Opal card, if you use it enough times a week, it taps out at a limit, we will cap it at $60 a week. Now, that family where we announced it at, they shift workers, they both work at the airport, so public transport's simply not an option for them. So they were saying somewhere in the range of $120, $130 a week for both of them at present. So we will more than cut that in half. So that is a massive saving for people in the cost of living space.
Great. Questions are piling in here. How can you protect our faith-based schools and our children if your leader doesn't hold the values that we do?
Well, we live in a diverse community.
Yep.
My understanding is that our leader is of the Catholic faith, but our caucus is made up of people who are, Catholics, Hindus. I'm sure there might be an atheist or two in there, but like I said with my earlier answer, we will set up a faith council, and any legislation that impacts on faith communities will involve that council. So, you can't have a leader that ticks all the boxes. Essentially, you're either going to have someone from the city or someone from the country. You're going to have a man or a woman. But participative democracy is about having an open door and listening to a wide range of stakeholders. That's what I've always done as an elected representative, and you know that yourself, and we'll do that. And when it comes to faith communities, we've got that faith council that I've spoken about earlier. So.
How many kilometres of road will $50 million build up 15th Avenue?
Well, 15th is a council road.
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding is that Liverpool Council have done detailed design. But it's important to note that the $50 million is in addition to the $305 million for the rapid transit. So You've got the $305 million for the rapid transit, and you've got the $50 million for the component of 15th Avenue. Now, if we're elected, we'll work with Liverpool Council on that. But let's make this clear. I'm offering $50 million for 15th Avenue. My opponent is offering $0. That's a one-lane road, no curb or gutter. It's a council road. If you live in this community, you know that each and every day the traffic stretches right up over the hill for kilometres, and it's simply unacceptable. I've got a solution. I've got a plan, and we're going to get on with fixing 15th Avenue.
So just to make sure we're clear, the $300 million for the rapid bus involves not just the buses and drivers, it's part of the other infrastructure that's needed to make that work?
Yeah, so you got $305 million for the buses and the rapid transit.
Yep.
And then, so that's to get buses to and from Liverpool, Penrith, Campbelltown to the airport. So there's a component of that will go into the project, and then you got specifically $50 million from the roads budget to do the necessary upgrades for 15.
Putting buses on the existing roads wouldn't be a rapid, would it?
Exactly. You don't even have rapid cars on 15th Avenue at the moment, so it's going to be hard to have rapid buses. Yep.
Next question. Will Labor stop private prosecutions like the one against Troy Stultz by Clubs Australia? What will Labor do against the massive money laundering via clubs?
So we already spoke on the money laundering stuff.
Yep.
So I think one of the more effective reforms will obviously be the cashless gaming trial, but reducing those cash limits from 5,000 down to 500.
Yep.
My understanding is the prosecution against Troy Stoltz has been dropped.
Yep.
But again, I believe they were civil proceedings. Again, we can all we can do is make sure we have fair, independent, well-resourced courts and justice system that arrives at fair, just decisions.
Yep. We sort of touched on the railways here, but there's a follow-up question. Will you and the Labor Party support the extension of the South West Rail line as heavy gauge from Leppington Station to the new Western Sydney Airport?
At this stage, the business case will be what they call a mode agnostic. So essentially what the business case will look at is what is the best, most efficient way to get people from the South West line to the airport. One thing I will note is that the airport will be, as well as the passenger, it will be freight.
Yep.
So certainly I know something that the federal government is trying to get their head around is how we're going to get that freight out. So
yep.
There will need to be a heavy rail connection one way or another. But you know that decision hasn't been made, and that's going to be left up to the business case and the experts to make that call.
Sure. Question: is it true that the Liberals' cashless gaming card proposal won't take effect till 2028, which is 2 elections away? How can we trust that it will ever happen?
That would have been a great question for my opponent.
It would.
Unfortunately, she is not here.
Sure. Question on energy. Will you and Labor stop the reckless run towards renewable energy sources and support the call to build a Heli coal-fired power station in New South Wales for baseload power?
One thing that we have committed to is a state-owned energy corporation, and I think when it comes to these debates about what's best, I think it's best to leave it up to the experts and the market. If renewables are the cheapest, most cost-effective form of energy, then so be it. But it really shouldn't be up to governments to dictate, which energy form is the best. We need a variety of energy sources, and the way things are going. I've got a couple of solar panels on my roof and a battery at home, and that's had a pretty good impact on my cost of living. And it's up to everyone to decide what they want to do at home, and in the same way it's up to the market to make those decisions. So.
Sure. I think we'll just take one more question and then call it a day. Chris Minns has promised to bring in vilification laws, not discrimination laws, in the first 100 days. What do you understand about the difference between the two?
Yeah, so Labor's commitment is to outlaw it's part of amend the Racial Discrimination Act to outlaw, to make it unlawful to discriminate people on the basis of their religion. Yep. So in regards to vilification laws, I know that's something that the federal government have been grappling with. But again, we're going to have a look at the Anti-Discrimination Act, send that off to the Law Reform Commission. They're going to do a wholesale review of that, and we'll see what comes back from there. So it's not up to myself or Chris Minns to make a call, but let's get the lawyers and the experts to take a look at it, and obviously we'll consult with faith communities and a whole range of stakeholders. I've said this a few times, but this is how we need to operate if we want good government. We have to speak with all the stakeholders, including faith communities, and I'll certainly be doing that in regards to any changes to the Racial Discrimination Act and around religious vilification or religious discrimination.
Good. So. Well, thank you very much for your time, Nathan. We've appreciated that and your openness in answering things. Yep. I presume you'll be around for a while to answer other questions.
I'm running
privately.
for the door. No.
And there are some handouts by the door on some of the other religious freedom issues that may be of interest to those of you here in the room. And yeah, if there are other things people are interested in about what's happening here at the church, at Hoxton Park Anglican Church, of course, please get in touch. We'd love to help with that as well.
Yep. Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Obviously, you know, this has been a fantastic forum, so thank you, and thank the church, and thank everyone for coming tonight. But we've still got 22 days to go. Don't be afraid to hit me up via Facebook, email. If you see me out in the streets at all, we've still got plenty of days of campaigning, and keep those questions coming by all the formats and all the mediums.
Good. Thank you very much. That's the end of the formal part of what we're doing. Thank you to those who've joined us via the live stream as well. It's been great to have you with us as well. Good night.
Thank you.